Right, Cape Floss. We've got some very serious issues going on in New Zealand at the moment. Now, I've heard that in Waitangi, as we speak, on the 28th day of October, 28th day of October, in just a minute, I'll just wait for a couple of, see if a couple of people come in. So we'll wait for a minute. And there's a lot happening in New Zealand. Hang on. I'm going to get this thing done here. Right, we've got one person in, and we're hoping for some more to come in. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of skullduggery going on in New Zealand. People that are working behind the scenes, signing up laws that we don't consent to, making sneaky deals behind all of our backs. See if this comes up. All right, there you go. Making skullduggery deals behind our back. All right, so, all right, here we go. We're going to get started. Today is the 28th day of October. And on the 28th day of October, around about in 1835, a document in New Zealand, as we all know, called the whakaputanga was signed. Now, what a lot of people don't know about this document, the truth of it is that in 1836, between the years of 1836 and 1840, many Maori, New Zealand native, they called them native Aboriginals back then, many native Aboriginals got together to try and combat this whakaputanga. And in 1840, in August, there was a court case. A lot of people don't know about this court case. What happened previous to 1835? That hundreds of, well, not hundreds, but several missionaries had come to New Zealand. And what did they do? They divided the chiefs. And then they took them away from their tribes. They took them to Australia. They took them to England. They took them anywhere where they were not near their tribes and got into their head. And then they negotiated with these chiefs to buy up all the land. Now, the thing was that for pre-1835, New Zealand was a protected country. The natives were the sole sovereign holders. It was by law that they were the sole sovereign holders, and nobody was allowed to buy their land because they didn't have a government. So any lands that were bought didn't have land deeds to back up the sales. Now, in 1835, they got a few chiefs, very few chiefs, and in the court case in August of 1840, it came out that Busby said these were the chiefs that were the most easiest to be manipulated. And what they did is they got these chiefs and they bought the land. They got them to sign the whakaputanga. Once the whakaputanga was signed, all of those lands that they had bought and all of those land deeds that they had divided up between each other became legal. Now, Busby admitted in court that they had agreed with the chiefs on this land partitioning and who was going to get. Now, the chiefs got their money and they did a runner, and they left the people, the commoners that were on the land, to deal with the fallout of the crap. Now, in 1840, so for 5 years, all of those tribes were fighting for their lands back. And then when the Queen had the right of preemption due to Norfolk Island, and she asked the chief, she said, I can only come there if you invite me and you give me the power. If you give me the power in your country, I'm going to take all those lands back. And that came under the Spanish, can't remember what it is. Okay, so all those lands were then taken back from all the people that had bought it. and they were placed into a system, and then everybody, that included donated land, bought land, gifted land, any land at all, had to be placed into this trust, and nobody was allowed to touch it. Every chief, every family, every missionary, every settler had to go to the court and prove their case. Most of them lost all their lands. Busby himself lost all of his land, and he fought for the rest of his life to try and get it back. All the missionaries lost their lands. Now, this was all kept secret. This court case is never heard of, but it's in the records. It happened in August of 1840, 6 months after the treaty was signed. It was the missionaries and the Ngāpui had taken the Majesty to court. Now, here we are all these years later, almost 200 years later, and on the 28th of October, what do you think is happening in New Zealand today as we speak? Sue Gray, Calvin Alp, I haven't seen Liz Lambert, she may be there or not be there, but I have seen, they're all in Waitangi, on the Waitangi grounds as we speak, signing, I suspect, in my conspiracy theory, they're signing documents. And what have they done? What they're doing now is exactly what they did back in 1834. They divided the chiefs. They went to each chief and they negotiated how much they were going to buy the land or buy the waters, the 4 waters, how much they were going to buy it for. That's what they've done in secret deals behind our backs. And then what they're doing is, and none of that money is going to the commoners, neither the Anglo commoners or the Maori commoners. And from what I can gather, I'm asking myself, the documents that they were using to go there were documents that said the United Nations, this is a diplomat of the United Nations, please let them pass, and they were calling them denizens. Now, denizens means that you are a person living in a country, but you're not born to it and you don't have any citizenship rights, but you have rights as a denizen by your document. And I'm not understanding why they've given these passes to all of the Maori to go there, because, of course, the New Zealand Maori have right to pass anyway, because it's their fucking country, isn't it? But anyway, they set up this big hui in Waitangi, and Sue Gray stood on the podium, and she wants the 1990 New Zealand Not Bill of Rights enshrined, entrenched in law. Entrenched in law is very different from normal law. Once something is put into entrenched law, it can't ever be changed. It's there forever. And so she wants it entrenched in law. Now, this 1990 New Zealand Bill of Rights is the Trojan horse, because one of the things is in Section 4, it says that they can override that law in special circumstances, so it's a useless freaking document anyway. Now, Sue Gray, she's not stupid. She damn well knows this, and that's why I'm calling you out, Sue Gray. I'm saying you're the freaking Trojan fucking horse to the UN, United Nations takeover of New Zealand. And we know all the chiefs have been bought off. You can forget about going to the chiefs. Don't even go to them. In my opinion, in my conspiracy theory, the chiefs have all been bought off, just like they were bought off in 1835. And they've done it again. And I tell you something, and well, some things I'm not going to freaking say. But anyway, Section 19 binds New Zealand to the Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Act binds New Zealand to, like, must be 5, 10 or 15. Altogether, there are more than 1,000 articles from the United Nations. Now, I was very suspicious because there was a guy. Now, the United Nations, as you know, when they did the housing thing, and that woman from the United Nations wanted to come to New Zealand, she said, she announced publicly that she was invited there by the New Zealand government. The United Nations must be publicly invited into the country or onto the grounds. And I was very surprised that one of the people on the Waitangi grounds yesterday made a public video announcement that all the people that were there had been invited. Now that is significant. So we've got invited United Nations, I suspect, officials and diplomats on the Treaty of Waitangi grounds on the 28th of October, on exactly the same day that the original whakaputanga was signed. And we've got a lawyer there, Sue Gray. She's a lawyer. Why have they got a lawyer there on exactly the 28th of October in 2021, which is exactly the day 200 and I think it's 186 years previously, 186 years previously that this document was signed. Now, if you're anyone in New Zealand, you all know what I'm talking about. Now, why have we got a lawyer on the Treaty of Waitangi lands on the 28th of October with documents that are saying diplomats of the Akiwa Embassy of Aotearoa? Aotearoa, I'm telling you, is a non-existent land, or it's a land that they have that has not been named on the maps yet, but is yet to be named and put on the map. But I'm telling you, this Aotearoa is a separate entity to New Zealand. Now, what is happening today down in Shelley Bay is just one of the examples. Is they went to Shelley Bay, they negotiated with the top chiefs, all right? They bought up the land for God knows how many millions. And they took a few of those millions, a very little bit of it, and they put it into the Maori Trust for sharing with all the thousands of New Zealand Maori that are entitled to the trust. But the bulk, in my conspiracy theory, the bulk of the cash, the billions, the millions, are in the hands of the high chiefs that have fucking sold you all out. They've sold you out. They did it in 1835, and they've done it again in 2021 on the 28th day of October as we speak. And there was a very distressful video from, may I say, Corey Bond, my apologies. He's put the video out, so I guess I can talk about him because he put the video out. And he showed a video. I was in tears. I swear to God, I sat on my computer bawling my eyes out watching him. He's in a field. They took all of these supporters and they had them railroaded into a field that is far away from the Waitangi Treaty grounds. So while the leaders, Sue Gray, Calvin Alp, and various other leaders who we know not who they are, was sat on the Waitangi tribe, on the Waitangi grounds, doing God knows what with the United freaking Nations. The other supporters had been railroaded into a fucking swamp, tall grass, and it was pissing down with rain, and they couldn't get their cars out, and they were left there. Now, he said which his tribe is this, and I'm just an Anglo person, and I don't know who the fucking tribes are, but all I know is I know what happened in 1835, and in 1835, the Ngā Pui went against all the other tribes, killed them all off, chopped their fucking heads off of their leaders so that they would have no leaders to own the land, chopped their heads off, sold the rest of them into slavery to the missionaries, and and then the other leaders, they all rose up together and they went against the Ngāpuhi, and they got the Treaty of Waitangi signed into law. Now, the third article has been removed. We know the treaty has been breached. Everyone, when they're telling you the government has breached the treaty, what they're saying is that they could not get around the chains of the treaty to sell off New Zealand. And when they're saying the treaty has been breached, it's because they wrote the tiriti and they removed the third article that had put in there that made them subjects of the 1688 Bill of Rights. The 1688 Bill of Rights forbids foreign governance, and the United Nations could not function in New Zealand under the Treaty of Waitangi. So they came up with this cock and bull fucking story of the treaty where the third article was removed. They've got their Aotearoa, which is it is a country that we know not where, but it ain't New Zealand. I'm telling you that. Then they've got the treaty that has been signed by a few, I assume, chiefs that has had the third article removed. With the third article removed, and then they've got this whakaputanga that has, on the whakaputanga has the native chiefs. The whakaputanga makes the Maori king of 2021, it makes him the absolute ruler. Now, he could not be an absolute ruler under the Treaty of Waitangi because it forbids it. But under the treaty, he can be the absolute ruler. And I'm calling out the Maori king, and I'm saying, have you sold the country out? Have you sold the people out? I'm just asking the question. I'm not saying that you have, but I'm asking the question. Have you fucking sold New Zealand to the fucking toilet of the United Nations and their fucking heinous human rights laws where New Zealand will have no power over their lands and resources ever again? And Sue Gray is at the Treaty of fucking, Sue Gray is at the Waitangi lands asking for the United Nations to be entrenched into New Zealand law forever. Think about your children. And Corey Bond is the first, Corey Bond is the canary in the mine. It's all going to come crashing down. They sidestepped him. They got all those people and put them in a fucking field in the rain and left them there, and they couldn't leave. That's what they did. And then the high up ones went to the Waitangi lands, and God only knows what they signed there in New Zealand. But we are in deep trouble. Now, I'm calling all the tribes. I'm calling on the tribes, and I'm saying that we all did it together in 1840 for 5 years. They tried to find a way around the whakaputanga. And in 5 years, a man called John Dunmore Lang, and his 4 letters, he found out that they had gone against the Majesty's right of preemption. It meant that the chiefs by law had to offer the land to the Majesty first. And because they had not done that, all of the land sales to the missionaries that had cheated them and left them destitute. There's a story in there from John Dunmore Lang of one man, one chief that was left sitting on the streets, selling his daughter to the missionaries for money because he had no land. His land was gone, and these missionaries had taken it all. And these same missionaries have never stopped fighting. In 1841, they set up an organization called the Aotearoa Association. Now, I haven't done a video about that, and I intend to, but since this is such an urgent matter, then I'm just going to go ahead and do this video without the evidence of that. But hopefully, if I get time, I'll do it for you. And then they have been fighting and manipulating the minds of the New Zealand Maori for decades and decades, and here we are, those people. So what we've got to do is we've got to join all the tribes together, and these are the tribes that we want. This is what I want you to do. I'm going to tell you what we need to do. Listen to me. I am the messenger. And here is the message from the ancestors. Do not undo what they put in place for the descendants. You have no right to undo this Treaty of Waitangi. You have no right to undo it, and you have no right to undo the original whakaputanga that was signed by the native chiefs in their collective capacity as the sole sovereigns thereof. Now, the second article of the treaty acknowledges all New Zealand Maori as the sole sovereigns thereof, and that has been removed from the treaty. And the third article recognises that the New Zealand Maori will be under the protections of the 1688 Bill of Rights, not this 1990 piece of crap that you've got there. The third article of the Treaty of Waitangi is bound to the 1688 Bill of Rights. Now, the flag. So what do we stand under now? That we know that the king has sold us out, in my opinion. We've been sold out. And so you can't stand under this whakaputanga, because whakaputanga acknowledges him as the absolute ruler of all of New Zealand, not part of all of New Zealand. So you can't stand under this whakaputanga. 2, this 8-point flag, I have been telling you for months, burn the fucking thing. You've got to burn it. The flag, Aotearoa, the whakaputanga, the 8-point flag, and the treaty are all in this house, if you can think about it, which is the United Nations house with the Aderns, with Sue Gray. They're all in that house. You've got, and you have no power under this, all right? And then the other house, we've got the Treaty of Waitangi with the chiefs as the sole sovereigns thereof. There's also protections in there for the Anglo people who are recognised as people, as subjects of the Majesty who are living in New Zealand and under her protection. So there's people that saying that the Treaty of Waitangi is nothing to do with Anglo people. It's got everything to do with us, because you don't have the right to remove us from it. And that's what the treaty has done. It has removed our subject status and therefore removed our 1688 Bill of Rights. So we stand under the Treaty of Waitangi, all New Zealanders. We stand under the original whakaputanga that's in our house. We stand under our flag, and our flag is the 5-point star with the white outline. Now, the flag has been found, and that's an omen from the ancestors. The flag has been found, and we stand under the flag that's been found. We have the proof. The proof is coming. So we stand under that, and we stand under, because the third article of the treaty acknowledges all New Zealand people and New Zealand Maori specifically as the subjects of the Majesty. As subjects of the Majesty, you come under the protections of the 1688 Bill of Rights. And the 1688 Bill of Rights forbids foreign governance, and that means the United Nations can't govern in New Zealand. Now, I'm going to make this a 30-minute video, so I've got 5 more minutes. I've done some more investigations. They've come up with this AI law. And under the AI law that they are about to pass in December, SOS. They're about to pass it in December. And in this law, they have put the treaty and the principles as a co-governance with the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People. So they've put them in a co-governance together, which they could not do that under the Treaty of Waitangi. And this is going to be put into law, possibly in December as we speak. So we've got a very short window here to stand up, save the treaty, save the original whakaputanga, and stand under our 5-point flag with the white outline. Now, there was something important that I also had to tell you that's in the works that they've got. Now, here's something very interesting that I did put it up on the site, and I can't remember the exact days, but on the 29th of September, the Governor General stepped down from office. And on the, now I'm not sure if it's the 28th, but I'm going to have to go back and check. But the new Governor General was not sworn in. It could be either the 22nd, but it's going to be very interesting if it's the 28th. Because if the Governor General was signed in on the 28th, that means from the 29th of September to the 28th of October, we had no Governor General. And that means that we had no treaty, and we had no Bill of Rights, all our protections, we had no constitution, everything was gone. And they had a 1-month period to sign any documents that they want to with the United Nations. So we don't know what they've signed. It's all been done in secret because they did just what they did in 1835. They separated the chiefs from the people, and they made secret deals behind all our backs. Now we also, there's just too much to tell here. So we all got to get all the tribes joined together. Now, if you're Ngāpuhi, and we know that there are many, many tribes that are Ngāpuhi and saying, yay, yay, this is going to be us. Listen to me. What happened in 1834? The chiefs sold the land and did a runner. That's what they did. They ran. Waikato took off to Australia. He said, I don't want to have any part of the slaughter, but he took his money and he took his family and he ran off to Australia. I'm sorry to hurt your feelings, but these are the facts, and that's in the history. Now, listen, they ran off, the chiefs ran off to Australia, and they fucking sold everything. And it was all the people that were left on the land that had to deal with the fallout of losing their land, and they didn't know why. They were just living there happily, nice natives having a happy life. And then these white people just come in and they said, we've bought this land and you have to get off and go and live somewhere else. And the people said, well, where we're going to live? And they said, it's not our problem. Your chief sold the land and it's ours now. And they made all the people just wander around hopelessly, helplessly, with no land and no country and nothing. And this is why all the problems happen. Now, they've done the same thing now. Ngāpuhi, listen up, all you Ngāpuhi. They've taken the most easiest chiefs to manipulate, the ones that get a bit drunk, the ones that have got a bit of a gambling problem, and they have made deals with those chiefs behind your back. You're not going to get the money. You're going to get a trust. And if you want your kids' education paid for, you'll get a little bit for that, or you might get $50 a month, but you ain't going to get the millions. So I'm telling you, you know, the four waters have gone into Ngānia Mahuta. You're going to suffer right along with the Anglo. We're all going to suffer. So if you're in Ngāpuhi and you're not one of those big, fancy, elite families, you've all got to stop your freaking fighting. And you've all got to stand together, fight for the treaty, save the treaty, fight for the original whakaputanga, fight for the 5-star flag, and also our flag of New Zealand, and fight for the name of New Zealand, because this fucking Aotearoa is a completely different entity to New Zealand. And all the chiefs, well, I would say the important ones, are in that place there. And then the rest of you are in the other place with us Pākehā. Because just remember this, as you can see from Corey Bond, just remember this. A lot of the Ngāpuhi were held in slavery, and they used to take all the other tribes and hold them in slavery too. And now they've been saying, we are together and we are what? You aren't fucking one. We're still at war. New Zealand, we're at war. I'm going to give it up now, but we are at war. That's it.